Up my apron and they held back my pay. Those Percy Street apartments, rent day was come.
Welcome to East Coast DNA. As usual, I'm your host, Darcy Walsh, and today we have a guest that I'm going to apologize for not having you on before, Charlie, but Charlie Acorn. Welcome, Charlie.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I've been following your travels and I enjoy the way you put your shows together, so I'm really happy to be here.
And actually, going back from like my origins in doing this, I originally, and I've referenced it a few times, but I did a few months with a different podcast
Hmm.
and ended up at Music Nova Scotia. And that's what the first time I met you, we had a brief interaction there.
That's right. Yep.
I, at the time, had never used Instagram. So there was a couple artists that I was like, if you want to like make a post under this account, and I was
Yeah.
handing over my phone to strangers, but you were one of those folks. So I always remember the first few people that I interact with that way.
Well, that's awesome.
And another cameo that you had in one of our episodes, just over to my left here on the wall, is when you were doing the album with Wichita and you
Mm,
were doing tour dates. They were giving out shots, like a big press photo of like you and the band.
that's right. Yeah.
And I caught one of those performances and have it signed with the tickets framed on the wall over here to the left.
Wild.
And it actually, the CEO of ECMA, Andy McLean, when I interviewed him when he was originally leaving,
Yeah.
um, he caught that that was in the background of the shot when we were
Ah,
talking
very
too. So
cool.
you have had a couple references over the years with what I've been doing, but we never actually sat down to chat. So
See, I dig stuff like that because before I got into music full time as a profession, I was on the journalism side of music as well. And at the beginning of my career, I had this music column in the local newspaper back in Truro, and I'd run a column pretty much every week, and sometimes it would be a couple of times a week, depending on the kind of activity that was going on locally. And but the same idea, like you have these interviews and you chat with people, and it was certainly before the advent of doing Zoom things or
hmm
podcasts and that sort of thing. But it was like taped interviews. You'd have the microphone that would stick to the back of the headset, and
yeah,
you would record the interview so that when you went back to go include quotes and things like that in the interview, you had these things. So for me, those are my little momentums from the couple of years that I was doing music journalism.
that's fun. It's funny. There's a few people out there. Another one that just jumps right to my head without listing a bunch of other people, like Trevor Murphy. Like
Yeah,
he was also like the media side at one point, and now he's ingrained a little bit everywhere.
yeah, yeah.
So obviously, based on the few things that we just referenced there too, your career goes back a little bit. So you've been around for a couple decades on the East Coast, but
Oh,
it's not just the
yeah.
East Coast though. You're world traveled at this point.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky with what I do as a musician that I've been able to represent. I've sort of taken the position that what I do as a musician serves as an ambassadorship of Nova Scotia. I think there's a few artists that I've had this conversation with from different parts of Atlantic Canada who all sort of feel like a similar philosophy of that when they travel the world they feel incumbent upon themselves to represent a caliber of what it is that we offer here in Atlantic Canada. Like the musicianship and the artistry of the songwriting and the music that is created here is really second to none on the world
hmm
stage. It doesn't have to bow down or play second fiddle to anyone really. Like we are very, very lucky. We're very spoiled in that sense that we have such a high level of artistry that's represented by Atlantic Canadian artists, and I just feel so privileged that even with all the ups and downs of the music industry being what they are, that 20 years on, I can consider myself still a part of it
Hmm.
in a way, not in a like, hey, look what I can do kind of way, but in a way like I get to contribute to the scene by way of being a songwriter and a musician. So I feel really fortunate in that regard.
And early on, uh, the time wise, since we're referencing some ages, if we go back when you were starting off your music career and going out and hitting the bars, playing those stages,
Mhm.
I would have been in the early stages of being a dad. So I was doing a lot of diaper changes rather than
Of
twisting
course.
off the beer caps back then. But your name is, and when I think back, there's a few people that I definitely followed, but your name specifically is one that people that were in my social circles at the time would be like, "Hey, I was out last weekend and I caught this guy. You should really check him out. He's really good." Like your name was constantly popping up until it seemed like I started hearing that like you were away and I was hearing about your name from other places. Like it was
Right.
Charlie Acourt from back home.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think especially when like I'm in Calgary right now. I'm on tour. And I just finished up a bunch of dates in BC, and I'm just about to start a run of shows here in Alberta. And then I go to Montreal for the Folk Alliance conference. But being out west, it's such a common story amongst Atlantic Canadian families to have other family members, relatives come out to the out west and for work or whatever,
Hmm.
or start a life of their own out here. And that's a unique thing in Canada, I find. Like there's just the high concentration of East Coasters that are out here. Um, and so there'd be lots of times people would come, like I'd come out to Alberta, and there'd be people come up to shows and say, "Hey, my brother or my sister or my cousin or I grew up in Fall River, and my mom told me that you were out here playing, and I should come out and see you." So there's been countless stories of instances like that, and I think lots of East Coast artists who get to a point where they can start touring outside of the Maritimes, they encounter that a lot more often than I think we really give it credit for, because we're really lucky in that regard that you can come out to Western Canada, and in lots of cases have a bit of a reputation precede you by
Hmm.
way of family members and relatives who are all like, they come out and then they're like, oh geez, they're hungry for a taste of home, and then they find out that someone from back home has come out to play some music. Then it's kind of a unique phenomenon that way.
And you've had the ability to keep that momentum over the years too. Like you're one of the people that I'm aware of just from following you online and being a fan that I see that you're constantly hitting the road. Like you're always out there performing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, you did that collaboration like I mentioned with Wichita,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you found time somewhere to make an album as well. So,
Well, that timeline was all interesting, and certainly pandemic influenced, like it was for a lot of artists. But like we had this project with Wichita. It was Jason Spinney's idea in the beginning to get together and have them as a country band connect with a blues artist, that they could sort of blur the lines on a bunch of tunes, including our respective original catalog. And it was always an interesting concept, but we could never make the schedules align. And then
yeah.
right. And in 2019, we decided, okay, this is it. We've, the stars are aligning, our schedules align, let's make it happen. So that summer we had gone to, we pitched the idea to Cavendish Beach Music Festival, and they were on board with it. So we made our show debut with that concept at Cavendish Beach, and we recorded that show.
Hmm.
And thinking that we were gonna put it out and tour the record. And then subsequently that fall, we had showcased at Contact East, which was in Charlottetown that year, and had tremendous response from buyers around Atlantic Canada. And we thought, oh man, this is the concept's grabbing a hold, people are into it. But then the contracts were coming in to start doing the shows, and then a few months later, the pandemic began and shut everything down, of course, in early 2020. And so all that particular project ended up having to get pushed a year
Hmm.
into 21 and 22. And so of course, we were bummed about it, but we understood why. But we were sitting now with this live recording on our hands. I don't think originally we had realized that that was going to be the recording that we were, ultimately going to release.
Hmm.
But when we went back and listened to those tapes of that particular performance, we were like, there's something kind of like really cool here. So, took the tracks in and started working on them and mixing them and all that. And then we ended up putting it out. I think was it 21 or 22 that we technically released that. I think it was 21 we released When Country Gets the Blues. And then we toured, yeah, that's what it was. And then we toured fall and spring
Hmm.
of 21 and 22 with that around the Maritimes. And then from that, on the back of that, I went right into another collaborative project with Susie Vinnick and Lloyd Spiegel. And Susie's a blues roots artist from Ontario, and Lloyd is a blues guitar player from Australia. And the three of us had been friends for years. And another similar opportunity had come along, except in this particular case, it was on a national level.
Hmm.
And as things had been coming back online, and presenters across the country, each of them kind of working with a bit of a different playbook on how to get back to being able to present live shows again. This was the opportunity to go, okay, we did like 27 shows across Canada with that blues trio, and it was all acoustic. And we recorded a record that I ended up mixing and putting together, called the International Roots and Blues Kitchen Party. And that was our first opportunity to get back on the national touring scene and trying to get presenters all working in the same block of time,
Hmm.
which, when things are working optimally, that's hard enough to do at the best of times. But, the challenge of the pandemic and building up, audience confidence again in being in public spaces, it was so tricky. But in spring of 23, we managed to do, like I said, 27 shows. We started in Whitehorse, and we worked our way right across to just outside St. John's. And that was an amazing time. And I think ultimately we needed that collaborative project in particular. For any one of us to try to have done a national tour would have been
Hmm.
really, really tough. But the benefit of that, not only were we friends because we'd been so used to having to be on our own for the last couple of years, that it served our mental health in such a great way, because we could play with friends again on stage,
Yeah.
and we could leverage each other's fan base in different parts of the country. So that was a really wonderful experience to be able to do that. But after those collaborative projects, I was definitely ready to make my own record again. And I had had a couple of things, rattling around the brain in terms of songs and style and such. And it was the opportunity to sort of come back to what I know works. And for me, what I know works is the friends that I play with and perform with, and working with Chris Kirby as a producer, because he and I had done so much songwriting over the years, and he produced the Triumph and Disaster record that originally came out in 2012. So we've had this long history together. So when the time finally came around in it was like late 23 Octoberish, we started working on pre-production, and then in January of last year we started recording the record and getting it ready to come out. And so San Palarino actually came out October as of 24. So it's only been out for just gone 4 months now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how has that been back on the road, like soloist?
Oh,
Like,
I mean, personally, it's been a joy to be able to do it, but it's certainly not without its challenges. I mean, and every musician is going through it. Like, I think, I think of some of my friends out there right now who are on the road as we speak, and they're wondering if they're going to have a show to play when they get to the venue.
hmm
If that's how fragile the ecosystem is right now. I think of venues that, want to put on these shows. They're fans of these artists. They go ahead and book the show, but but there's been this real heavy reliance on pre-sales
yeah.
more than ever before. Where if pre-sales aren't at a certain level, they're pulling shows because they have no idea now
hmm
if the audience is going to show up, if they're going to walk up and buy tickets at the door. That, because that used to be a thing. It used to be a really reliable thing that, venues had this sort of, they had their clientele of supporters had sort of this conditioning of going, well, we can buy tickets at the door and we're safe to do that.
hmm
There's no fear that the show is going to get canceled. So we'll just do it the day of the show. But now, post-pandemic, that's so much, it's just untenable in a lot of regards. And so it's scary, it's exciting, as if you're into if you like being twisted and stressed and full of anxiety all the time about whether or not you're going to do a show. But there is a certain excitement. There's a certain naivete that I
hmm
recognize in myself. I'm not speaking on anyone else's behalf, but in myself, there's a certain, just put the blinders on. Everything's burning,
Yeah,
but just put the blinders on, and I feel like Dory sometimes from Finding Nemo is
yeah.
just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And ultimately, I think, for me, I know that this is what I'm meant to do as a musician, as a songwriter. I'm supposed to be on a stage where I can share and connect with audiences. And sometimes those audiences are going to be large, and sometimes they're not going to be so large, but they're still people who made an effort to come to the show. And so I think that's where the dutifulness of it all
hmm
for me comes through, is like I have a duty as a as a songwriter to be that focal point so that people can come out and invest their connectivity into something that they can, I think, maybe see themselves back in. I see the music, see themselves reflected back in the music, in the songs that they're listening to. And so I love being on the road. It's certainly stressful though at
Yeah.
times, and but there's ways of compartmentalizing that, I think. And that's what I've learned over the last 20 years.
I think that is one thing I've picked up being around artists like yourself over the last couple of years. The blinders thing, even though it sounds super unhealthy for anyone that doesn't really do that, I've adopted that.
Yeah.
From time to time, I like to borrow a set of blinders just to get
Yeah.
through a patch here and there.
I think you're right, because I mean it's not that that we're just blindly wandering through the wilderness hoping that we're we're gonna make it in the end. A lot of what we do is strategic,
Hmm.
and it has to be, especially when if you're applying for funding, or you're planning out the next 18 months, or even what you want to see your growth look like over the next 5 years. But but I will say, with a caveat, that there is a certain amount of delusion
Hmm.
that you have to embrace, so that you don't just give up before you even begin.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. And that might actually be the answer. I did have a question for you. I was curious that with the fact that I can see parallels between you and a number of the other guests that I've had on the show, who many of whom are now viewers of the show.
Right.
I'm curious that maybe for somebody that doesn't have as much travel experience, if you had any tips on maintaining the longevity, because you do have yourself a degree of stamina that maybe some artists don't have to keep yourself out there doing those back-to-back shows.
I would say, first of all, don't beat yourself up over that, if that's the case, because there is recurrently, that I'm aware of, there in certain circles there are conversations about how we can make local touring sustainable.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is not necessarily just going down and playing at the local watering hole. Although, if that works for you, and it serves the purpose and scratches the itch, then that's great. If I think, there's a really great a great tune, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He's from the West Coast here. I think he's from Alberta. No, he was living in Ontario, in Hamilton. Is it Corn Raymond? I can't quite remember his name, but he had this really great tune, and it was basically, it was called "There'll Always Be a Small Time," and which was a really wonderful kind of nod to the local venues.
Hmm.
And so you don't have to beat yourself up about that, if you don't think national touring and the logistical challenges that can present is your bag. Then work, deconstruct it, work backwards. If it's something you do want to do but you don't know how to get there, then it is just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other.
Hmm.
And I don't think anyone can do it without taking a couple of lumps along the way, myself included. It's not like I've gotten to this point because everything was rosy.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but you do learn how to roll with the punches a little bit, and adapt when things get a little dicey, or something unexpected happens when you're on the tour. So I guess my advice would be to, um, the best way to see the best way to see the dream take shape is actually deconstruct it, and reverse engineer,
Hmm.
um, and then make those steps a lot more manageable, because it can often feel like it's just so intangible to say, I want to tour across Canada. And okay, well, maybe it's not about touring across Canada. Maybe it's focusing on one part of the country and going there for a little bit. And like what I'm doing right now, like I did, the notion was to do 5 shows in BC, 5 shows in Alberta, and that's a manageable chunk.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to mean that you're continuously out on the road for weeks on end. If you're in a position, if you can create a plan that kind of makes it break it into chunks, and that works. But even then, like, maybe it's about finding house concerts through the Maritimes, that you go on a great website like Side Door,
Hmm.
and they've been continually building their database of house concert presenters who are looking for local talent to be able to showcase, and give exposure to. So there's there's definitely more than one way to climb the ladder. There's no wrong way to do it. some ways maybe take a little longer than others and maybe a little more forethought, but it's attainable.
Yeah. I like the deconstructing, kind of working backwards a little bit to something that's maintainable for the individual.
Yeah.
It's a interesting perspective. I didn't really consider that. I'll probably adopt that myself now too. So for 2025, we're only at the beginning of the year, and as you mentioned, you're on the road right now, but you're kind of at the tail end of some of those dates. So by the time people have seen this, you're probably back on the East Coast.
Yeah.
What's the rest of the year looking like for you?
Well, it had been a really good start to the year so far. So like right off the bat, I was in Ireland for a showcase at a conference in January, and then yeah, like right now I'm about to start the back half of the Alberta tour, Folk Alliance conference in Montreal, which for anyone who works in the industry knows that's always a bit of a uh, uh, I want to be polite. But it's nuts. It's crazy
Yeah,
there at Folk Alliance. This is you basically get anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 musicians all there hoping to book a gig.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so it's kind of crazy to cut through the noise there, but it is a lot of fun and it is a really great experience. And then for me, I'm working on festivals for the summer. I'm working on a trip back to Australia.
Cool.
That's going to mark the Australia trip I'm excited about, because if that's we're not quite ready to announce all the dates on that yet, but to me, that's going to mark my actual return to international touring since the pandemic. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to because that's been the for me, I've sort of seen it like as as we were coming out of the pandemic, it was like the local stuff kind of came back first, then the regional stuff, then the national stuff, and now finally the international picture is kind of coming back into focus for me.
Hmm.
And for some it's been faster, and for others it's they're still plotting their course. But I'm excited for that to be able to return to Australian audiences, and I'm working on I have irons in the fire to create my first UK tour, and for later in the year. I have shows across the Maritimes all through the spring, and one of the ones that I'm really looking forward to, of course, is the Songwriter Circle that's working with Steve MacIntyre and Steve and Robin, and doing the Robin's Nest concert series there, the with the cabin in the woods type thing, and then we're going to be doing March 29th with Terra Spencer and myself and Steve, of course.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's those opportunities where I get to hang out with buds and hear songs and go, oh yeah, I wish I had done it that way, or just be able to collaborate again and feel the warmth of camaraderie when you're on stage in those environments. That's a wonderful feeling. So as much as I love solo touring,
Hmm.
I also love performing with my band, but also getting a chance to sit down with other songwriters is always such a joyful time for me.
And I know that you were ready to get back into writing your own songs, but I do always have a little bit of fanboy in me when I see lineups and I know of people that are interacting behind the scenes.
Right.
So the fact that you're going to be performing with Tara, and I'm also a fan of hers, I'm kind of I'm kind of hoping that something comes out of that evening that maybe you guys decide to write a song or something together. So
Oh, very cool.
I don't know. I'll just leave it out there. I know Tara tunes in from time to time too, so maybe you don't even have to bring it up.
Well,
Maybe.
Tara's on the road right now down in the States, performing with David Francie. So if she's tuning in and watching this.
Well, thank you very much if she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, yeah, of course. Uh, but I mean, I would love to do some more writing with Tara, of course, because we had sort of our first opportunity to do that with this new album. We were all hanging out at Chris Kirby's for a writers' camp a while back, a year and a half ago, and we had sat down. Chris had given us this task of writing a song with the word Citadel Hill in it. And so we took it away, and it was Tara and myself and another writer, Yvette Coleman from Newfoundland. And the three of us sat down and we started working on it. And Tara and I started talking about what it was like being in Halifax in those early days of the 2000s, when I had first moved to Halifax in spring of 2000, and she was just going, I think, through just starting university at that point. And so we were comparing notes on what Halifax was like around that time. And for me, it sort of became a conversation about what my origin story was like, coming up on the busking scene in Halifax
Hmm.
before I was actually regularly playing at bars. And so the three of us ended up writing Citadel Hill, and it became um, it's become one of my favorite songs to sing from the new record. And I've been playing it from all the shows, and kind of a throwback to earlier when talked about how, touring out west, and you get a lot of people coming up to the shows who are, relatives are from back home, and they come up and say, "Oh man, I think about that, and I hear your song, and it's got like, and I think about Pizza Corner, and I think about, being drunk at the Palace, and all of that, and so it's kind of a cool little a little callback to some, for lots of folks, some good memories downtown
Oh yeah.
Halifax. Yeah.
It's always nice. I know that years ago, it was kind of a unofficial rule to not put your local references into something that you were going to market out there
Yeah,
into
I
the world.
know. I never
But
really understood that.
and now, I mean, I say years ago, so some of the younger viewers may not even have any frame of reference for when I mean, because I know
Yeah.
about like Sloan releasing stuff in the '90s, referring to going to the LC. Uh,
Yeah.
I remember people being like, what does that mean?"
Yeah.
I'm like, everyone here knows what it means. So it is cool that over the years I do see that paying homage to your hometowns and
Yeah.
your own personal histories does seem to be a little bit more acceptable this day. And to your point, especially when you're out playing live, the feedback that you'll get from an audience, and I see it with other performers too. Like people love those little things that trigger a memory for them, and that is it makes them pay attention to what you're singing about.
Yeah. 100%, because some of my favorite writers had that always had that ability without it coming off as corny or cheesy, or like it was a ploy
Yeah,
to get you listening. Like I hear sometimes I hear stuff like that in certain music today, and I go, oh, that was kind of a cheap trick.
yeah,
Whereas if there's an actual backstory, then I think a lot of people like to take the time to figure out what that backstory was, and how it connects to them in their, like, I listen to a lot of Jason Isbell writing, and
hmm,
there's times where, like, there's a line in This Ain't It, off the Weather Vanes record, it's like the second last song on the record, and one of the early lines is referencing a near beer,
yeah,
which I thought was brilliant. It was like, what a great way of like painting this picture, using this reference that not necessarily everyone is going to get.
yeah,
It's kind of
exactly.
like the whole LC thing, but in the other direction.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh man, like, and to me that didn't feel cheapish or like a ploy. It just felt like he was calling out the situation for what it was,
Yeah,
really painting this picture. And so I always love those instances. So getting a chance to do something similar, you with the strength of Tara and Yvette as just really great writers, and Yvette's sense of harmony is just outstanding. It was really such a great experience, and so, to bring it back around, if we do that show on the 29th, it would be great to, who knows, maybe Steve and Tara and I sit down and we end
yeah.
up writing some sort of folk opus.
I'll have to dig around in the background when that's happening and see if there's any inkling it might be happening.
Yeah.
And I want to give a quick shout out to Chris too, because he's also a name that pops up quite frequently on the show. He's has been on once, And I actually have a conversation going on with him and his wife by email over on the computer behind me right now too. So
Yeah.
I will ask if there's something that you wanted to play off with from the album. I don't, maybe Citadel Hill itself.
I think we do Citadel Hill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things too that I could script these things, but the authenticity of it organically coming up from the conversation is always nice too. So it
Yeah.
does seem like a nice natural fit and a good segue for the end of the show. And for anyone out there that's watching, you can go out there and buy those tickets now.
Mhm.
Let Steve and Robin know that you're on the way out. And definitely it's a worthwhile night to top name acts on one stage. So I would be excited to have the opportunity to go myself. So I'm definitely putting that on my calendar.
Right on.
Anyone out there that hasn't already hit subscribe, please subscribe to East Coast DNA. We have probably just finished a slew of content from Prince Edward Island. So thank you for any new subscribers. But anyone new to Charlie and myself, subscribe to Charlie online too. Follow what's going on in his camp. And follow along with East Coast DNA to see where we end up next. Maybe we'll pop over to one of those shows and have a little bit of a live stream while you're in the middle of that performance too. Who knows? It'll pop up all over the place.
Ain't technology grand?
Yes, I love it. So thanks again for your time, Charlie. And for those
Cheers.
that are still here, this is Citadel Hill. Thanks. Bye.
Hop on the 80, coming from Fairview. Your father's mustache was 6 stops away. And I'd serenade the dishpans, scrubbing my fingers till I hung up my apron and they held back my pay. Those Percy Street apartments, rent day was coming. Could use a Hail Mary to drum up a dime. So I dust off the 6th Street and head out to Prince Street, busking for French fries in the key of John Prine. Time canyon echoes across the harbor. Time marches on, my memories stand still. Through the fog and confusion of a city in motion, the sun's climbing over that Citadel Hill. Neckties and pinstripes are out on their lunch break, tossing out change for a song they all know. Oh, and if I was lucky, I'd hit pay dirt by Friday, and by 30 more days in a town I call home. Noontime canyon echoes across the harbor. Time marches on while memories stand still. Through the fog and confusion of a city in motion, the sun's climbing over that Citadel Hill. Long after midnight, when they close out the palace, the people they gather at the foot of the hill. Flag down a taxi, feeling wretched and wrinkled. Promise to call, they never will. Oh, if I had $1 for every brown-eyed girl and gambler, all 27 verses of American Pie. Well, I'd take up my winnings and build me a mansion and sing out my days from that city hillside. Hey! Noontime cannon echoes across the harbor. Time marches on while memories stand still. Through the fog and confusion of a city in motion, the sun's climbing over that Citadel Hill. The sun's climbing over that Citadel Hill.